dialogue in SEOS, which is the Coptic Evangelical Organization for Social Services. And we will have through virtual, through Zoom, Ms. Sufyan, Ms. Yuban, Ulay, UN Special Rapporteur for Trafficking in Persons, especially women and children. And we will have two videos from my friend, Muslim Hassan, Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls, and this Dorothy rather from the working group on discrimination against women and girls. Both videos, we will start with the videos first, then we'll move forward to my colleagues. We will start with Ms. Reem Salim, Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much to the organizers for inviting me to this important event, and my sincere apologies to everyone for not being able to join you in person. There's of course no doubt that Egypt has made important strides in the last 5 years in combating violence against women and girls. It has, for example, adopted a national strategy to eliminate violence against women and girls, the one from 2015 to 2020, which focused on prevention, protection, and prosecution. It is also working on tackling the issue of female genital mutilation and has, of course, a national committee to eradicate FGM. And it has also undertaken important legal reforms to strengthen the protection of women and girls against violence, including stricter penalties for perpetrators and improved legal frameworks to support survivors. At the same time, as also other mechanisms and treaty bodies have indicated, these advances have been hampered by a number of challenges that we see, which are also the case for countries in the region, which are legal gaps in addressing the full gamut of violence against women and girls. There are obviously enforcement issues. There are deep-rooted cultural norms that need to be tackled, including to end FGM and early marriage. There is the under-reporting, due to fear of social stigma, victim blaming, or distrust in the legal system, as well as limited support services, economic dependence on male family members, spouses. Now, in the few minutes that I have, I wanted to say a few things about the key recommendations that my mandate has made to the government of Egypt since 2013. During that period from 2013 until 2024, my mandate has been joined 23 letters sent to the government of Egypt in which a number of issues have been raised. Some of them have been recurring, and so based on these letters, I would like to share 7 recommendations for how ending violence against women and girls can be improved. Recommendation number 1 is to address the issue of excessive use of force and violence, primarily by law enforcement against women that may be either taking part in protests or that voice political opinions or undertake human rights work. So in the yearly commemorations of the 25th of January Revolution, women protesters were often subjected to excessive force. Some of them also experienced sexual harassment. Peaceful protesters, including women, had been also arbitrarily detained over the years, and some of them continue to be in prison. One woman that the mandate intervened on, together with others, had participated in filing a complaint against police for brutality against a woman protester, and she was subsequently subjected to reprisals And that demonstrates that there continues to be really impunity for law enforcement for acts of ill treatment and violence. Recommendation number 2 is to ensure that women organizations, human rights defenders, and civil society organizations continue to be able to do the work in an unhindered manner, of course in compliance with the right to peaceful and association and freedom of assembly. Some of these women that the mandate and others have engaged on have been harassed because of their work. They were also subjected to travel bans, and a number of them appear not to have had access to effective justice mechanisms. And as we know, these are rights that are enshrined in international treaties and conventions that Egypt has signed. For example, the CEDAW Convention does require state parties to take all appropriate measures to eliminate discrimination against women in the political and public life of a country, and to ensure that women, on equal terms with men, can exercise their right to participate, including in non-governmental organizations and associations concerned with the public and political life of a country. We also know the United Nations Declaration on the Elimination of Violence Against Women notes that states should recognize the important role of women's movement and non-governmental organizations worldwide. And of course, several General Assembly resolutions, including Resolution 68/81, acknowledges the important and legitimate role of women human rights defenders in the promotion and protection of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. That very same resolution also recalls that domestic law and administrative provisions and their applications should enable the work of women human rights defenders, including by avoiding any criminalization or stigmatization of the important activities and the legitimate role of women human rights defenders and their communities, of which, of course, they are part of, or on whose behalf they are working. Recommendation number 3, also related to the work of human rights defenders, including women, is to refrain actually from detaining them arbitrarily and also from subjecting them to detention for prolonged periods of time, by also denying them effective access to justice mechanisms. Women human rights defenders and women civil society members are, like everyone, protected against arbitrary arrest and detention. And also, as we said, they have the right to freedom of opinion, expression, and freedom of movement. Recommendation number 4 that I would like to make relates to the conditions of detention. And here the mandate has also engaged on behalf of women that have been imprisoned. And there it would be to ensure that women in prisons and in detention are kept in internationally recognized, are kept in conditions that meet the internationally recognized minimum standards for the treatment of prisoners. We know the Mandela rules, for example, outline the minimum conditions for the treatment of individuals in detention. They aim to ensure their dignity, safety, and basic human rights. So, to mention a few examples, a female human rights defender that was detained and on whose behalf the mandate engaged appeared not to have access to the required medical attention. In one prison facility, also women prisoners had experienced inhumane treatment, poor detention conditions, as well as gender-based violence, such as strip searches and sexual harassment. The mandate joined a number of other mandate holders in expressing concern regarding the lack of sex and gender-based measures for women detainees overall, and the lack of access to hygiene materials in a number of cases. When it comes to access to health and other key services while in detention, I know Egypt's obligation under the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, but also the Bangkok rules adopted by General Assembly Resolution 65/229, and that also provide guidance for the specific characteristics and needs of women in prisons. Recommendation number 5 relates to the repatriation of its own citizens, particularly women and children, from the camps in northeast Syria. Here, my mandate has joined other mandates with regards to requesting Egypt to take back women and children that are believed to have relationships to ISIS and that are reportedly Egyptian nationals, to take them back from Al-Hol and Rosh camp in northeast of Syria. They are living in terrible, inhumane conditions. They are effectively kept prisoners, and there are very credible reports that the women, at least, are subjected to sexual and gender-based violence. Recommendation number 6 relates mainly to non-Egyptian women, and here recently the mandate joined a communication to the government following its adoption of its new asylum law. This was towards the end of last year, and the main recommendation here is the importance that the rights of women asylum seekers and women in need of international protection are upheld, particularly against refoulement and gender-related forms of persecution in line with the CEDAW Convention. And last but not least, although this was not the subject of allegation letters, I would say that the 7th recommendation would be to expand and increase the number of visits by special procedures to Egypt, including by my mandate. I have, since I took up this function in August 2021, requested a visit, and I remain very keen and ready to carry out such a visit whenever that is possible, in order to assess the advances and document the advances that Egypt has made, as well as support all Egyptian stakeholders, including the Egyptian government, in addressing outstanding challenges. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks to you. I would like to seize this opportunity to stress the need for having more Arab experts in the position and mandates of special procedures and activities. This is very important, especially when we focus more on the experts coming from civil society, because they constitute a big fortune for our countries, actually. And on the other hand, I would like also to call again for the Arab governments to expand and cooperate more with special procedures, especially special procedures to remove the confusions that happen from time to time. I'm happy to announce that Ms. Mulani, the UN Special Rapporteur on trafficking in persons, especially women and children, that she is now with us online, virtually, through Zoom, and I would like to ask her, Ms. Mulani, you have the floor. Okay, no problem. Ms. Mulani will join us again. Now I'd like to hear from Ms. Dorsey Strada, the member of the UN Working Group on Discrimination Against Women and Girls. She sent us a video. Would you like to start with Strada or Mulani? Mulani, okay. Mulani, good afternoon. Welcome. I love to give you the floor now. Enjoy it.
And thank you for the opportunity to join you at this important side event on the occasion of Egypt's review under the 2025 Universal Periodic Review. So I'm very grateful to the organisers for the opportunity to join you virtually. Thank you for accommodating this possibility. I am going to speak briefly in the context of the focus on women's rights in Egypt, challenges and obstacles. I'm going to focus specifically on the work of my mandate on trafficking in prisons, especially women and children, which has a strong gender equality and child rights focus. And my focus on gender equality is inclusive in that it includes LGBT persons, trans women, people of diverse gender identities. And so I look at it in that context. My mandate, the mandate of the Special Rapporteur on Trafficking in Persons, has undertaken a visit to Egypt, but that was, I think, almost 15 years ago. So it would certainly be timely to undertake an additional visit given the significant developments in the country. And I would echo the Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women in calling on the Egyptian authorities to facilitate more special procedures visits and engagement and follow-up on our work. So the recommendations that were made from the previous visit of the Special Rapporteur on Trafficking in Persons, many of those recommendations continue to be very relevant today. And the mandate focuses on all forms of trafficking, including for sexual exploitation, child and forced marriage, forced labour, exploitation in criminal activities, illegal adoptions, forced surrogacy. So all forms of trafficking in persons are engaged, and it is a human rights mandate, so the focus is very much on the protection of the rights of trafficked persons and persons at risk of trafficking, including the principle of non-punishment. And I'm going to reiterate the recommendations from the United Nations Human Rights Committee under the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, recently adopted, which focus in particular on the prohibition of human trafficking and the measures taken by the state. And I think it is important to acknowledge that significant measures have been taken, including the adoption of legislation and the establishment of a national referral mechanism for victims of trafficking. However, the concern is that in practice, the strategy, action plan, the legislation, and the national referral mechanism are not fully functioning. The national referral mechanism itself is not yet fully operational and is not used as it should be used, engaging all civil society actors and victims and survivors of trafficking to ensure timely assistance and protection measures. So various forms of trafficking remain prevalent, including forced labour and sexual exploitation, particularly affecting women migrant workers. We also see a continuing prevalence of child trafficking, including for purposes of forced-labor and labour exploitation, and a continuing concern is the prevalence of transactional temporary marriages of women and girls for sexual exploitation. So I call on the state, and again echoing the previous country visit recommendations and the recommendations of the Human Rights Committee, to call on the authorities to strengthen the national referral mechanism for victims of trafficking and to ensure the provision of unconditional specialised assistance, including psychosocial support, healthcare and legal assistance, and the allocation of sufficient resources for provision of specialised accessible shelters for victims of trafficking, and assistance and protection measures that are inclusive, that are accessible for women and girls with disabilities, including all victims of trafficking with disabilities. We also need to see more effective access to compensation and reparations, and explicit legislative protections on access to compensation, effective access to legal aid, and reparations and remedies for victims of trafficking. And this, I think, necessitates the establishment of a dedicated fund to support the payment of compensation. And I want to highlight, building on this, the current context in Egypt, and I had the privilege to participate in a recent conference, the International Association of Migration and Refugee Law Judges, and also to visit the Sudanese refugee reception facilities hosted by UNHCR in Cairo. And I acknowledge and commend the reception of high numbers of refugees from Sudan by the government of Egypt. And according to the government, 1.2 million Sudanese refugees have arrived since April 2023, and UNHCR is reporting nearly a tenfold increase in Sudanese persons registered as refugees, primarily women and children. And my report to the Human Rights Council in 2023 highlighted in particular the links between trafficking in persons and risks faced by refugees, in particular refugee women and girls, in the context of displacement. And I'm concerned, therefore, to ensure that the government takes steps with the support of the international community and international organisations to ensure timely registration of refugees, to avoid delays, and to ensure access to safe accommodation, as well as to ensure the introduction of screening measures specifically addressing risks of human trafficking or previous experiences of human trafficking in the country of origin, in Sudan, or en route, or in the country of destination, Egypt, because we know that refugee women and girls in protracted situations where they may not have access to safe accommodation, shelter, employment, training, assistance and protection measures may become victims of trafficking or may have become victims en route. And my mandate has been involved in a number of applications and has led communications to Sudan highlighting concerns in relation to trafficking in persons, particularly for purposes of sexual exploitation. I have joined with colleagues also to express specific concern in relation to the recently adopted asylum law, and particularly its implications for refugee women and girls and asylum-seeking women and girls. On that, I've highlighted concerns around the risks of refoulement, forced returns, of asylum seekers, refugees and migrants to situations where they are at risk of persecution, including trafficking in persons, as well as emphasising the right to seek asylum and other forms of international protection, and to ensure non-punishment, non-penalisation of refugees who cross borders irregularly, and non-punishment of victims of trafficking who may be in an unlawful situation, including in an irregular migration situation, and that non-punishment principle must be applied without discrimination on grounds of gender, disability, race or ethnicity, sexual orientation or gender identity, or migration status. So while acknowledging the high numbers of refugees and asylum seekers hosted by Egypt, I think it is critical that measures are taken to ensure effective access to international protection and protection of refugees, asylum seekers and migrants from risks of trafficking that might arise in the country of destination, in reception, and to ensure timely access to assistance and protection measures, safe accommodation, education and training, and residence and status. So these are my key points. I'm happy to take any questions, and thank you again for the opportunity to participate virtually. Over to you.
Thank you so much for this valuable input. Please stay with us. We'll get back to you. Now we are with the video from Ms. Dorothy Estrada, the member of the UN Working Group on Discrimination Against Women and Girls.
Peace, colleagues, friends, it is an honor for me as a member of the UN Working Group on Discrimination Against Women and Girls to participate in this side event on women's rights in Egypt in the context of its Universal Periodic Review. Thank you so much to the Egyptian Center for Women's Rights for their important work. I am sorry that we were unable to be with you in person, but we did want to be present in this way in this very relevant event. As you know, women and girls in Egypt face discrimination in law and practice in different forms, including in matters related to the family, unequal economic opportunities, and uneven political representation, in addition to high levels of domestic and gender-based violence. According to the UN Population Fund, 90% of Egyptian women have undergone some form of female genital mutilation, which is a clear violation of their sexual and reproductive health rights, and people defending those rights often face intimidation and violence. In its last report to the Human Rights Council in 2024, the UN Working Group signaled global gender backlash that is escalating. It is the denial of the recognition, enforcement, and realization of women's and girls' rights, or the retrogressions and steps back in that regard. We emphasize that this backlash not only destabilizes and undermines the foundation of the human rights system by denying equal rights to half of the world's population, but it also makes impossible any prospect of just, inclusive, peaceful, and sustainable societies. It is therefore urgent to reaffirm and recommit to the universality of women's and girls' rights and to substantive equality. The working group has been working in different ways to support gender equality in Egypt. We recently engaged with civil society concerning the asylum law and its effect that it could have on human rights of migrants, asylum seekers, and refugees, women who seek protection in Egypt and who are forced to leave their countries of origin due to serious forms of discrimination and gender-related persecution from armed conflict, violence, and other serious human rights violations may be affected. In this regard, in our 2019 report on women deprived of liberty, the working group signaled that measures to combat terrorism and corresponding national security measures sometimes profile and target women, and in particular those from certain groups, including female human rights defenders. So we have recommended states that these types of terrorism, anti-terrorism, and national security measures, measures to confront conflict or crisis, incorporate a women's human rights focus and do not instrumentalize women's deprivation of liberty for the purposes of pursuing government aims. And in this sense, we invited the government to establish clear timelines for a transitional period and to guarantee that UNHCR registered refugees and asylum seekers' rights are respected, safeguarding their legal status, and to ensure extension of residency when needed. Additionally, in 2023, we sent a letter to the government of Egypt regarding restrictions on women's mobility based on certain interpretations of religion that are enshrined in legislation and social practices concerning male guardianship. These practices are contrary to international human rights norms. They restrict women's and girls' rights, and they often allow for repressive control by male family members. We reminded the government of its obligation under CEDAW to take measures to modify social and cultural patterns of conduct with a view to achieving elimination of prejudices and customary practices based on the idea of inferiority or superiority of men over women, or on stereotyped roles for men and women. We also have engaged with the issue of women human rights defenders and joined an urgent appeal in this regard concerning defenders, women defenders that are in the custody of the Egyptian authorities. And we recall Article 7 of CEDAW and our 2022 report on girls and young women's activism, stating that stigmatization, harassment, and outright attacks are often used to silence and discredit women who are outspoken as leaders, community workers, human rights defenders, and politicians. And they often face different forms of intimidation, sexualized attacks, and sometimes even death threats and murder. These letters are publicly available if you would like to consult them. And lastly, I would want to mention the issue of the family, which has been high on yours and our agenda, our common concern for the historical context of the family that has too often been a source and site of discrimination and stereotyping of women and girls, and that conditions and limits girls' futures and girls' and women's rights to education, health, employment, sexual and reproductive autonomy, and choice. and this often also leads to unequal allocation of family resources, discriminatory forms of marriage, and domestic violence. In 2015, the working group signaled these concerns in its report on family and cultural life, which supports diverse forms and compositions of families and calls for the elimination of discrimination within the family, including economic or legal forms of discrimination, also for banning child or forced marriage, temporary marriage, and polygamy. And we are actually working in this year on 2025 on constructing, building upon those ideas and updating the understandings of rights of women and girls within the family under international human rights law. And we look forward to exchanging ideas with you. Some of the concerns I have mentioned surrounding human rights of women and girls in Egypt have also been addressed by African review mechanisms, and all of these are sources in which we can reflect together. And we hope that these interventions by the working group can be useful to you for your work and your advocacy, for which we are very thankful for. My gratitude to you, and I wish you a very fruitful discussion.
Thanks, Mr. Strada. I'm now happy to give the floor to my friend, my colleague, Mr. Bilal.
Hello, everybody. I'll try to be more focused and precise, and I'm going to give another angle of the challenge that women are facing, especially the Christian woman. For many decades, the Christian woman seeking for a specific law that protects her from any kind of discrimination, especially when it comes to the divorce and also remarriage. And for many decades, there was a lot of talks, and sometimes it's serious, and after some steps, and frozen again, until what happened. I need to give you a little bit additional information. We have the three main churches in Egypt. We have the Orthodox, and we have the Catholic, and we have the Protestant. And each church, it has its own, I can say, status or rules when it comes to the marriage. And to bring the church together, to have a common law for women, a Christian woman in general, this was a big challenge for women. Until the Prime Minister decided in 2019 to form a committee which composed by the three main churches, as well as with some people they are from the Ministry of Justice, as well as representatives from the church who are concerned about the women issue and also the family laws. What kind of the challenges that women are facing in Egypt, especially Christian women in Egypt? It's the divorce. The divorce, it's not allowed, regardless to the Christian, only in one case. This is as was written in the Bible. In the case of adultery and remarriage, it is another big issue. To give another remarriage certificate for women, for the Christian woman to get married, this is like impossible. Even if she is not the one who is committed adult. But because we are in the society that controlled by man dominant, that's why the woman always suffer. But after, in between, you know that there is a law, it's called Al-Khola, which many of the Christian women find it's a golden solution. But which one find it as a golden solution? The one she is capable to not asking for any of her rights financially or any kind of her right. She has to give all her rights and rich people, as well as those who has power. But when it comes to the normal Christian woman, they have to stay suffering because of lack of the resources. And after the winning of the foreign minister and the minister of justice and reforming this committee, there was a lot of discussion about from the church. They agreed finally after like 7-8 years. They come with some agreement, but also with some condition. They have to open the window for divorce, not only for one reason, that may give the woman a window for hope if she are suffering from any forms of violence or discrimination or punishment or whatever, she can find. We have to open that reasons for divorce. Remarriage. It used to be when in the Quran law, woman can divorce herself, and it doesn't matter in which church she is related to. This is one in the Quran. But also, she cannot get married again, because if she got Khola, she has to get married again with the same church that she is divorced from, and which sometimes people use this as a reason to change their denominations as a matter of only getting divorced, or change even the religion from Christian to Islam or anyway. And this is a big challenge it's really fighting the freedom of the woman for one of her rights. Inheritance. We are under Sharia law when it comes to the inheritance. And there is no laws for Christian, there is no law. But people in the church used to say, as in the Bible, God creates us men and women equally. But when there is an issue in the court, and the judge has to follow the Sharia, and then men get more than the women. This is when it comes to inheritance. What we have to do? We have to, first of all, the three church, they have to work very hard in educating women in the church about the marriage as a unity, as a family, as God create us equally, and we have to create our family. And that means that it's not an easy way. I don't like that man, or this marriage is not a good one, I need to get rid of that. No. The church has to work very hard in a way that helping Christian women and family to unite. Another issue when it comes to inheritance, we have to educate boy and girl that they are equal. It's a matter of education. And this is a kind of discrimination, not only for the Christian, but also in most of the families, looking for a boy that is preferable than a woman. And the three issues that we agreed together is education, awareness, cooperating with the government, because women can go to the court for divorce, but also the church still keep that if there is any cases related to the family, they can consult with the head of the church. Because it's not that easy to just say they want to divorce, then divorce. It's also a kind of a Christian value that also we have to think several times of why we are creating this kind of unity and a family. As I mentioned, as a consultative source, it's not making the decision. Fourth, a social justice. And because of the way of education and cultural norms and all that, we have to educating people. We have to force social justice among them. Recommendation. that they agreed together. It's opening the reasoning of divorce, and then she can find different ways to get rid of this unsuccessful marriage, as well as when it's come to inheritance, it has also to have a specific laws clearly identified from the beginning about inheritance, and the church has also to play a role on that. I'm trying to give just a quick brief, yeah. We cannot say as a Christian, we don't have law right now. We don't have law, but we have a proposed law. But this is submitted some time ago. We are advocating and lobbying for fostering this kind of laws to be issued, because number of cases are increasing because of socio-economic crisis that all the families are suffering. And when it comes to fragile group, and Christian woman is one of the fragile. And we have to keep and advocate more in issuing these laws to protect the Christian side. Thank you.
Thank you, Samira. Thank you. Actually, this complicated going down, Christian like that stitches is very difficult. And as an exception, I believe the strong state authority is very important, because maybe 5 or 6 decades back, the state was more advanced than the community regarding women's rights, actually. And especially the last 25 years after the law number 1 for 2000, which gives the women the right to have free will, unique will to get rid of this marriage. But of course, she will have to as well not to take her rights, financial rights, and so on, related issues. Now, with my colleague Nehad, the chairwoman of the Egyptian Center for Human Rights.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank you for giving us your time, and would like to thank all my friends and colleagues who start their talk before me, because they will reduce a lot from what I would like to say. Actually, I would like also to thank Excellencies, Special Rapporteurs, because I joined them from when they said we need more visits, because when we follow the women's situation in Egypt, it's very controversial. We see lots of improvement has been done through the last 5 or 6 years. And at the same time, our ranking in international report is still very low, which gave us a big question about where is the gap, what is the dilemma. If we make all these efforts to improve women's status and made a lot of legislation amendments in will of women, and still face a lot of challenge. Let me go directly about our political and civil rights, and also economic and social rights for women. No one denies that there is a lot of improvement has been done after the 2014 constitution in Egypt, which guaranteed quota for women in a parliament. And based on this, we find the increase of representation for women in parliament to about 27%, and in Senate about 13%, which is never happened before. In a level of government, we have declined from 25% representation in a cabinet to last cabinet even 13.3 after appointment of 4 ministers, and also, as I said, in this we consider decline actually. If we see, I want to make it fast, but as is fast. As I said, if we review the international ranking, we will find improvement in the level of representation for women in the level of parliament and senate, but we do not have representation in the local council at all, as we do not have local council since 2008. This is a big challenge, as the local council or municipal councils is a main source of having new leaders in the society. Also, we saw improvement in the level of judiciary institutions, but we still have 2,000, less than 2% of women representation in as judges. And we need to make lots of effort in this, especially after a long time to have women in judiciary bodies. When we come to economic and social rights, also we can recognize a lot of changes has been done in level of legislation, which is, from my perspective, very important and a quick change, equal treatment in taxes, authority, quota for women in any board of companies who want to register in Borsa, stock market, and also a lot of improvement done related to micro and medium enterprises, yet we have a decline in the level of engagement in official workforce. Unfortunately, we've been 2018, women were 24% in official labor force. Now we are 16. Which show a big gap between women graduate from schools and universities, which we succeed to fill the gap, the gender gap, and we have a huge investment in education, and this is not integrated to workforce and opposite workforce, women in workforce decline, and this reflects in international ranking, like Women Business and Law, the report issued every year from World Bank, Egypt 16%, which is very low comparing with even other Arab countries and Muslim countries. Or MENA region countries. Gender gap report was issued from International Economic Forum also show that women ranking in Egypt in a level of discrimination or equality 136 out of 147 countries, which is very low, and this is the big question we all have. As I said, the controversial situation between a huge effort has been done in a level of legal reform and strategies against violence against women and strategies for Egyptian women. And in the same time, the statistics show us a big gap related to enforcement. When it comes also to violence against women, actually, we still have a big challenge in this area. Last statistics show that violence against women increased to 31%. Among women who face violence at least once in their lives, and domestic violence become an issue. And when we saw the situation, although the criminal law is neutral, and should treat women and men in an equal base. But as mentioned in last session or the previous session, the procedures is very complicated and very frightening to women to go through when they make a report, a police report. The time from a police report to public prosecutor to court to have a verdict is about 6 months, and these 6 months could be acceptable if we have protection, a mechanism, a solid and strong protection mechanism for women who report regardless domestic violence or sexual abuse or any kind of violence. And actually, this is one of the main challenges we face as law enforcement and protection mechanisms. This leads us to join lots of recommendation has been done or given to Egypt, and we have to admit that there is a lot of effort that has been done as well, but there is a delay in issue a new family status law. Also, the president formed distinguished committee from 10 judges and said they will review the family law within 2 months and extended another 2 months, and actually this was from 2 years. And we still waiting for this new law which could help to fill the gender gap in a level of legislation and enforcement. As I said, we don't have any discrimination in penal code, but we have Article 60, which say anything compatible with Sharia law is acceptable. So this put a big question mark related to domestic violence. Is this acceptable and non-punishment, or it is not acceptable and we enforce the penal code with all degree of abuse or all degree of this. So our main recommendation, as I said, we need to emphasize the law, enforcement of law, and be sure that we have a monitoring mechanism for discrimination against women in labor market, supporting mechanism and protection mechanism for women who suffer from any kind of violence, and also increase women representation in all fields, political and economic field. I will stop here to not take a lot of your time, and thank you again. Happy to get any questions.
Thank you, Nahad, for this very good work. And I believe we have a lot to talk about, actually. And we have a lot, and there is space to time. However, we would like to give the floor to whoever would like to interfere and maybe ask a question, try to be briefly as much as possible. Dr. Hani?
Thank you for the panel, the discussions, and the insightful presentation about the human rights in Egypt. Actually, I want to talk with two hats. The first hat as an Egyptian. We can achieve some real progress regarding to change the culture. So women empowerment not to be achieved through quota, but it is something integrated in the Egyptian culture. So we can be proud that we can elect women because they deserve, not because they are privileged through the quota system. This is one. The second half, I'm speaking as a Coptic Christian person, and we know how many or how thousands, and there are thousands of family challenges for Christian women who wanted to be get divorced, who wanted to be free from their bad situation, domestic violence, discrimination against them, but they cannot be free because the church is very strict. And unfortunately, the state not play the good role because they don't want it to be in tension with the church and impose something in favor of women's rights, of Christian women's rights. This is actually a dilemma. How can we keep the state powerful in order to interfere and to tackle and address such problems, at the same time respect the church and its belief, and how to treat all Egyptian women at the same floor. If Muslim women have the right to get divorced, have the right to be released from these challenges, also Christian women should have the same privilege. Thank you.
Let me try to verify something with you. I hear that the three churches has approved in writing about the new proposed law. And proposed writing to the state, to the Minister of Justice, to the Presidency, something like that.
Maybe Madam Samira can explain more. She is better than me to understand this, but the problem is not in the law, the problem is in the practice.
Yeah.
The church always has its own authority in order to impose these restrictions on the law and on the life.
A very direct and short question to colleague Madame Abou-L'Qamçan, related to how do you explain the declining trend of female labor force participation despite the enhanced profile of education and other aspects? Thank you.
Thank you so much. My question is to Mrs. Nihad. Thank you for your statement. And my name is Ahmed Salim, Sinai Foundation for Human Rights. Sorry?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. When I listen to your statement, I feel like, okay, this is one side of the whole picture. So can you tell us what did you do to change this situation for women like Without a Banner, your colleague, human rights defender, who remain for years behind the bar in terrible detention conditions, and eventually she was recycled with two new cases without ending their detention. Also, another model like Dr. Laila Swift, on her 120 days or hunger strike, an Egyptian academic mother for the prominent human rights defender Alaa Abdel-Fattah, who finished his sentence, and this is also an Egyptian woman suffered. Finally, I want to listen to your comment about the report issued by Human Rights Watch and our organization, Sinai Foundation, about dozens of women has ties with ISIS in Sinai, maybe even like relative ties or other ties. Those women were surrendered themselves to the Egyptian army in Sinai, and they escaped from ISIS. They were obligated to join ISIS. Many of them were kidnapped by their husbands or their relatives. And when they surrendered, after they were abused, ISIS obligated to marry several times in 1 year. Many of them were kids during this. And they're surrendered to the military, and since 30 seconds, they're circulated many times in cases, while in the other hand, the men who surrender in initiative by the military, this is not my speaking or not my speech, this is a military spokesman speech who opened a window to the militants to surrender. And those militants, and also a Human Rights Watch report, now has advantages like houses, pockets money monthly, because they change, they surrender and their weapons. So there's like a huge, my question, what did you, how did you intervene, or what are you going to do to change the situation of these women who were abused by ISIS and now their abuse continuing to happen by the authorities?
Thank you. Mr. Sheikh.
Nobody can deny that since 2014, since the new constitution, that the women situation in Egypt become more and more figures, but most of us know that all the centers and NGOs working with human rights issues, especially for women, forget what happened in places like our Egypt, like village. Most of us just talking about cities. Nobody care about the women outside the capital, outside the cities. And there's many problems in this area related to the culture, especially from the women itself, related to their characters. So, what can the centers or NGOs help us to improve the situation for the women in the village or in the upper Egypt? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sareen.
Thank you very much for giving me the chance. I would like to ask many questions. Are you ready?
No, not many. You have two.
Two questions?
Two questions.
Thank you for clarifying this. My question number one, you mentioned that there is no municipalities election since 2008, and you consider this as a violation of human rights. Do you have any idea why this kind of election is not happening in Egypt? That's question number one. Question number two, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi last month released 4,600 people based on a presidential based on a presidential pardon. None of them was females. Do you have any explanation why exactly the Egyptian government would like to keep female prisoners, especially who have a political background, especially the ones who have a family member who normally been a prominent political leader in a group or in a political groups. I hear names of females being hostages / prisoners for 10 years just because she is the daughter of that person, or she is the wife of that person, or she is the relative of that person. How do you describe this? Because this is not only a human rights violation, this is an elimination of a human people, of humans. Thank you very much. I would like to have the questions again if there's a second round.
Maybe.
I seek clarification from حضرتك because I want to comment, but I'm afraid I got half of what you said.
Yeah.
Are you not happy with the fact
The
that
voice.
I'll ask you to repeat the question because I would like to respond, please.
You want me to read the question?
Okay.
Yes.
Which one?
Let me. We will move later on to it again. Once we have time, we'll move to it again.
No, because here is a very important point concerning
we have.
those extremists
I'm sorry to
who are
interrupt.
being rehabilitated.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We have allegations with that which is not verified, I'm sure, and you know that.
No, but I have some information.
But
Please go ahead.
let us talk later on because we don't want to waste time for this. Later on, please forgive me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The European Union would like to thank you for organizing this event. It's indeed very interesting to hear more about the human rights situation of women and girls in Egypt. It was interesting to hear both what the special rapporteurs had to say and also the member of the working group of discrimination against women and girls, and of course also what the chairwoman of the Egyptian Center for Women's Rights had to say. My question goes to you, Mr. Chairwoman. Given that you gave a bit of a mixed picture of the situation of the human rights for women and girls in Egypt right now, you were saying overall there are some positive tendencies, but indeed there is also some negative tendencies, and as we can see with the ranking of the World Bank and also the World Economic Forum that you were referring to, could you please shed light on the situation now as you see it compared to previous years? Are women better off now in Egypt than they were 5 years ago? And what is the current government of Egypt doing to improve or not the situation of women and girls? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now we will start with Ms. Luca to answer the question.
The only question from Annie. You know very well that the church, for all the decades, controlling themselves, very strong. But with the whole what happened, and we said that thousands of women live in a broken family and suffer a lot, which circulating again the same problem with the kids and the children, and then going continue. I have to tell you, the church leader realized this gap and being together almost like 5 years, meeting together the three head of the churches, try to find solution and to try to, they worked hard to be aware that they have a little bit to raise their hands and giving a little bit space for women, giving a little bit opportunities for broken family to be solved. And also, we are believing in living on a state flow. That's why we are pushing very much to have a strong law that accommodates all the hopes for the three churches. Getting the struggle with the three churches, which one can dominate more than other. This is a side internal issue. But agreed that we have to live in a state of law, and we have to protect the future of Christian women by helping them, not only leave them with a problem, but solving their problem. I think this will be happening after approving the law. That's why we are here, we are pushing in Egypt, in several meetings. We try to help them that we need really, if you want the Christian woman to stand strongly, you have to protect her by law, not only avoiding her from facing the society as a problem for the society. All of us, we know that women households, the number of women households are increasing between Christian and Muslim. But for the Christian, it's more needed because there is a lot of oppression on here. I think the future of it's going to be good, especially for the head of the church.
Thanks, Rhea.
Thank you for an important question, and I would like first to respond to Hani and Assam together because they both talk about the culture. Actually, as a lawyer and practicing law, I would like to say culture is an excuse in many cases. Rule of law and the state of law should put regulations, legislations, and people follow these regulations. Let me give you an example. Egyptian people who live in Egypt and all the time talk about culture, when they go to any European country, they respect the law. And regardless if it meets their values or it doesn't meet their values. And there is a lot of changes has been done in the level of legislations with a strong enforcement. People follow. I've been a lawyer and advocate for women's rights since 1992. So I witnessed a lot of resistance to a lot of legislations, and now we implemented and enforcement this legislation as it built in our software because of law. So as a lawyer, culture is very important component, but in many cases used as excuse. And when I say we always talk with women in cities, it is not true at all. We, as Egyptian Center for Women's Rights, we receive about 12,000 complaints and seeking for consultations every year. And when we classify this complaint and consultations, most of them related either to domestic violence or deny inheritance. So women want their inheritance, but a mechanism and law mechanism doesn't help them. We now have changes in the inheritance law related to enforcement and give women their inheritance. We took about 10 years discuss with legislative bodies and the government, and they all the time say women will not make a case against their families. And once the law approved, you cannot imagine number of cases failed and reported in the courts in Egypt. It was like a revolution. Why women wasn't asked before? Because they know they may stay in the court 20 years, gain nothing, and lose social support from their families. But when they found a law could support them, they go and implement the law. So I would like to review the issues that civil society work with women in cities. We would be happier, by the way. Our problem, because we work in all cities in Egypt, and we have network of 450 NGOs, local NGOs working with ECWR in all Egypt and in all governments. So when we come to Dr. Ayman, why we have decline in labor market for women? For many reasons. First, the discrimination in labor law. And actually, labor law talk about women and support women, but there is no infrastructure support women. When we don't have nurseries and labor law not force workplaces to have nurseries for their kids, and they put more than their salaries to put their kids in nursery, it means we kick women out of labor market. When we do not have cooperation between ministries and make kids go out of school at 12:30 in KG and 2 in all other phases, and at the same time work close at 3 or 4 or 5, women will not leave their kids in the street to work. So there is a lot of lack of communication and coordination among ministries. There is no infrastructure support to women, and at the same time we have problems of sexual harassment in the street and in our workplaces, and this is still dilemma. Above all, Corona period and the regression has been happened in Egypt because of the Corona, and a lot of private business closed, which affect women's rights, which lead us to think about all these challenges to find a solution. Mr. Ahmed Salim, when you talk about Huda Abdelminan and Dr. Laila Swift, we advocacy organization work based on files, and on these cases you raised, we review the files. And this has led us to criminal procedures law. When we said it is a women matter as well, it is not only men matter as discussed now. We don't listen or be invited to discuss criminal procedures law because a lot of women faces some allegation and put in detention, and when they finish this allegation, face another allegation. This doesn't mean I completely agree with what you've been raised, because we investigate as NGO the cases we receive, and we send to understand how we work. We receive complaints, and based on these complaints, we try to document it by reports and by police reports and other. The document way we then trained 30 years ago with Egyptian Organization for Human Rights and other international organizations for human rights. So there is a lot of allegation. We do not have evidence is this true or not true, but the cases you mentioned, as we agree, if someone finished their detention period based on court verdict, it should be released immediately. This is what we are discussing this all the time. We making a statement and send it to the president and send it to Ministry of Interior, the unit for human rights at Ministry of Interior, and make this effort. We don't have magic stick to change the situation, but we do our best in this. And I would like to cooperate with you and the Human Rights International Human Rights Watch for investigate the allegation you have. We may come together to truth first and the solution second. You asked what we do for changing women's situation. As I said, we are lawyers, defenders, human rights defenders. So we review cases and we review accusation and penalties and all this. We cannot do more than this, and communicate, as I mentioned, with the different authorities. Samir, your question is very valuable, but I recommended to have this question for Egyptian government, because I have the same question. Why we don't have local election since 2008? This is the same question I have. And why the list of prisoners who has been released have no women? Actually, the last group, we sent this to the presidential office and to other authorities. We succeed to release 18 with the last group, and it seems we have to make the same mechanism again. For doctor from EU, 18
females.
18 women.
And the last bargain was about 406 something or so. No one knows the names in them, no one knows the genders. You don't know the names. You didn't verify them.
Only a number.
Only a number, yes. And we don't know if they are only criminals, some are related to politics or some so. We don't know.
But they are released.
You are guessing. They are not released yet. You are guessing. You are guessing.
No, I'm not guessing. I'm asking you questions because you're claiming that you know.
It's not my intention to respond or comment or something, but we are like you. We are the only human rights watchdogs. We understand what's allegation and what's the verification and how, when it's violation, when it's not. And the phenomena of municipal, for example, is not a violation. It's not intended, by the way. So
it's indicated.
Yeah,
it's very beautiful.
Let us assure that we are very open to cooperate in any allegation, to investigate any allegations we have, and any names we need to review it to be sure what is the accusation and what can we help at least in a level of legal assistance and legal support. Last but not least is a question from EU about the evaluation for the situation now and before. This is very important question. I can say we made a lot of progress in a level of law, which is, as a lawyer, it's a huge step. I can give you example if to understand how important this changes in a level of legal reform. We talk about 20 years to change nationality law. Yani I remember start talking about nationality law maybe 80s, and we succeed to change it at 2004. Last 5 years we succeed to change about 30 legislations. Some of them very famous, like FGM, become a felony with big sentences in jail and lots of complementary punishment. Like sexual harassment, that become a very big crime, a felony as well. Related to privacy of data for victims of sexual abuse, we change article criminal procedure law to keep privacy of data. But as I mentioned, it's a very huge step to change at economic level. We have a lot of important changes, but we still need to work hard for level of enforcement and mechanism of protection, and as Mr. Chair said, culture as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Al-Qumsan. I would like to have at last Ms. Mulali is with us. I'd like to give her the final word in this event. Ms. Mulali.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to join you. Thank you for all of the contributions and comments. I know the range of issues and concerns that have been raised, including violence against women, sexual harassment against women, discrimination in relation to nationality, as well as concerns in relation to the rights of refugees and migrant women, which I highlighted in my own work. Again, given my mandate relates specifically to trafficking in persons, especially women and children, I emphasise again the importance of ensuring effective assistance and protection, non-punishment of victims of trafficking, prevention of trafficking, which means requiring promotion of gender equality, educational, workplace and training opportunities, and political participation. And partnership with civil society is a legal obligation in the fight against trafficking. It's also essential that that action is taken without discrimination, ensuring access to protection for refugees, asylum seekers and migrants who may be at risk of trafficking or already have experienced trafficking in prisons. So all of the concerns raised and issues identified in relation to gender equality, rights of women and girls, rights of LGBT persons, the importance of ensuring that culture is not used as a defence to justify discrimination or violence against women or girls and minority communities. These are interlinked and essential to effective action to combat also trafficking in persons and other forms of violence and discrimination against women and girls. So thank you again for the opportunity to participate in this side event and the importance of making sure that the UPR is an effective mechanism for human rights protection, supporting your work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mulali. I would like to thank also my colleague and friend, Samira Luka, and of course, our gratitude to our colleague, Nehad Al-Qumsan, chairwoman of the Egyptian Center for Women's Rights. I would like to make two last points. First, I would like to apologize to my chief ambassador Khattab for interrupting her. I just was trying to avoid the bilateral discussion, which would affect the rush of our discussion. And the final thing is, again, the call for our government in Egypt, our government, to be active in cooperation with special procedures, special rapporteurs, independent experts, because this will be very helpful whether to provide technical assistance in the ongoing programs and strategies, national plans of action for human rights promotion, or to remove the confusion of the reality in the situation of the state. In Egypt, in the Arab countries, there is a lot of confusion because there is no, this kind of direct communication, direct interaction is not enough. It's very slow, very weak. We want it to be strong because this will be very helpful for the situation of human rights, of women's rights, of all categories' rights in the Arab region. Thank you very much.
Thank you.